Hello, I'm Jina Kim, your host for the GEOVISTA. Once dominant on the global stage, European nations now grapple with political turmoil and economic uncertainty. Germany, a manufacturing powerhouse, finds its status increasingly precarious. The UK remains mired in instability in the wake of Brexit. And France faces relentless waves of mass protest, leaving little room for calm. Now, with the former President Trump's return to power, the chaos only seems to intensify. Can Europe's leaders find a way to turn this crisis into an opportunity? Join me, Jina Kim, as we delve into Europe's challenges today on the GeoVista. Germany, the UK, and France, once regarded as Europe's three major powers, are experiencing a noticeable trend, a shift to the right. Far-right parties in these nations are gaining ground, subtly but profoundly reshaping Europe's political landscape. The causes of this rightward shift are often traced to economic instability and perceived weaknesses in leadership. Shall we start by looking at the situation in Germany?
Ich finde, es ist etwas ganz Besonderes, Bundeskanzler dieser Republik zu sein. Es ist eine große Herausforderung. Ich bin sehr dankbar, dass ich nun von den Bürgerinnen und Bürgern dieses Landes und vom Deutschen Bundestag den Auftrag gekriegt habe, das zu machen.
3 years have passed since Olaf Scholz succeeded Angela Merkel, who led Germany for 16 years as the nation's chancellor. Upon taking office, Scholz introduced reforms across the economy and society, including raising the minimum wage, expanding renewable energy initiative, and promoting digital transformation. However, 3 years on, his leadership is facing mounting criticism for failing to effectively navigate Germany's deepening economic crisis. Once celebrated for its robust manufacturing and export-driven economy, centered on the automotive sector, Germany now finds itself struggling to adapt to the demands of the digital era, mired in what some call a low-growth swamp. In fact, Germany's Ministry of Finance reported a shocking economic growth rate of minus 0.3% for 2023, with a further decline of minus 0.2% for 2024. The primary factor blamed for Germany's economic troubles is the failure of its energy policy. In April 2023, Germany shut down its last 3 nuclear power plants. But with the Russian-Ukraine war cutting off imports of Russian natural gas, electricity prices surged dramatically, severely impacting energy-intensive industries like manufacturing. Germany's heavy reliance on exports to China and insufficient investment in digital transformation have further eroded its global competitiveness. This is most evident in the automotive industry, where Germany is losing market share to Chinese electric vehicles. Even Volkswagen, a symbol of German industry and a leader in internal combustion engines, recently announced that it would shut down at least 3 of its 10 domestic factories for the first time in its 87-year history, since its founding in 1937. Amid these challenges, Chancellor Scholz's inability to present a clear vision or demonstrate decisive leadership has only deepened public dissatisfaction. Chancellor Olaf Scholz faces a confidence vote in December 16th. With approval ratings stuck between 20%, he risks going down in history as Germany's shortest-serving post-war chancellor.
We will rebuild the infrastructure of opportunity, the world-class schools and colleges, the affordable homes that I know are the ingredients of hope for working people.
The situation in the UK is similar. Prime Minister Keir Starmer, who took office after a landslide victory in the snap election this July, has seen his approval ratings plummet just 3 months into his term. Recent polling shows support for Starmer's Labour Party at 28%, marking the first time since the election that it has fallen below the Conservative Party's 29%. Starmer's declining popularity is closely tied to economic challenges and shifting public sentiment. In his first budget, he announced tax increases amounting to around £40 billion, the largest hike in over 3 decades. Drawing criticism for breaking his campaign pledge to shield the working class from tax increases. However, the UK's economic troubles began long before Starmer took office. The political turmoil caused by Brexit weakened trade relations with the EU, leaving British businesses to face high tariff and trade barriers. Meanwhile, London has seen its status as a financial hub diminish as companies relocate to the European continent in search of better opportunities. The Russia-Ukraine war has intensified the crisis, driving up electricity, heating, and food prices. With inflation exceeding 10%, real wages have declined, and consumer confidence has plummeted, further slowing economic recovery. Despite these challenges, the UK government has little choice but to maintain austerity measures. Public debt now stands at roughly 100% of GDP, and the budget deficit is at 6% of GDP, largely due to subsidies from pandemic-era stimulus programs. On top of this, issues with trade, security, and immigration have compounded, further diminishing the UK's standing on the global stage. After 14 years, the Labour Party has returned to power under Keir Starmer. But can he rise to the challenge and lead the UK to recovery? Emmanuel Macron, President of France, has pursued pension and labor market reforms, promising to transform France into an economic powerhouse. However, the resulting political isolation and economic challenges persist. The Macron administration raised the retirement age from 62 to 64 to ensure fiscal sustainability. Yet, this sparked massive strikes and protests, further dampening France's economic activity. Rising youth unemployment, sluggish consumer spending, and surging national debt have left France's fiscal policy increasingly constrained. Recently, President Macron faced further backlash by appointing a hardline, right-wing politician as prime minister over a leftist candidate who won the parliamentary election. The move has deepened dissatisfaction among opposition parties and citizens alike. The leadership and economic crisis in Germany, the UK, and France underscore the growing instability of Europe's core powers. If these challenges persist, Europe risks losing not only its political unity, but also its influence on the global stage. How will these nations overcome their crisis and restore economic and political leadership? The world is watching closely as the future of Europe and its place on the global stage hangs in the balance. Yes, we've just looked at the political and economic challenges facing major European countries. Amid increasing uncertainties in the geopolitical landscape and the global trade environment, we'll now discuss what the future holds for Germany and other European nations with an expert. Joining us in the studio, Frederik Spohr, a journalist from Germany and the director of the Friedrich Naumann Foundation Korea office. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Once heralded as a paragon of economic success in Europe, now it is facing some symptoms of economic slowdown, and some observers argue that perhaps these troubles can be attributed to the leadership of Chancellor Scholz. How do you see this perspective?
Well, I think we need to dig a little bit deeper. So the current issues that the German economy has and the roots of it, I think they are already older and they last longer than the term of our Chancellor, Olaf Scholz. In the recent 2 decades, Germany had a very supportive environment globally. So we had cheap oil, cheap energy from Russia. Then, of course, we had more and more globalizing world. We had the boom in China, where German companies benefit a lot of it, right? We sold machinery to China, a lot of cars. Now China is facing a slowdown, or at least a slower growth. Then, of course, we had the peace dividend. We didn't have to invest much in our defense, in our military. This has also changed. So this environment that has been very supportive has changed now, and now we really feel the symptoms. The growth has been slow already in the last years, but now what we also see is that the slow growth is affecting the labor market. So in recent years, companies were very cautious to lay off staff because we have a lack of skilled labor. But this has changed now because apparently the issue has become so seriously.
Like you said, the troubles may not be within the realm of political leadership because these are the root causes of the slowdown of the economy. However, some still argue that the crisis management skill is maybe the problem. And how can you assess the current leadership's crisis management skill compared to the past?
Well, I think the past leadership under Chancellor Merkel, it maybe was a bit too complacent because everything was running okay because of this favorable environment. But of course, if an economy is into crisis, this has, of course, to do with the current leadership and the past leadership. When it comes to Olaf Scholz, I think it has become clear now that certain action needs to be taken, and he was too cautious to take it. So if you ask economists in Germany, it's actually pretty clear what needs to be done. So we would need to have a more flexible labor market. There would need to be more incentives for people to take jobs. We would need a more pragmatic approach towards energy policy. We need less regulation, more flexibility. So in the recent 2 decades, more and more has been added up, more regulation, more laws, and this has kind of slowed down the innovation of Germany, and I think this needs to be tackled and needs to be changed. The German government broke up, mostly also because of this question. The Liberal Party asked for more supply-side oriented reforms, but this was not possible under the current coalition. So there will be new elections in February, and then the German voter can decide in which direction Germany should go.
Sure. Well, then turning to a broader trend, when we look at the statistics, trade statistics of EU, we can see exports to US and export to China account for much portion of the whole trade. Then we have concerns about growing tension between US and China. How do you see the significance of this tension to the EU economy?
Well, I think this conflict is also going already for a couple of years now. And of course, this has negative effects on such an open economy as Europe is and as Germany is. So Europe is the largest trading partner for around 80 countries. If you compare that to the US is only the largest trading partner for 20 countries. So Europe really depends on an open economy, an open global economy that is connected. And if there are some kind of disruptions, of course, this has a negative impact on German economies and on European economies. So far, this has been, I would say, punctual. So, for example, I'm sure you heard about the Dutch company ASML, for example. So they were affected by an export ban of high technology goods to China. That, of course, harmed their businesses. And this didn't only cause harm to the Dutch company, it also caused harm to some German companies who are the main suppliers of this Dutch company ASML. So of course trade conflicts globally, that has always a bad effect on the European economy because it is so connected to the world. And of course there is reason for concern under this new Trump administration that we'll have now, that things will become worse in the future.
Yes, let's talk about the US later. But first talk about China. During the G20 summit, President Xi met separately with the leaders from Germany and France, and he specifically mentioned talks about kind of compromise on tariff disagreement. Do you think there is a possibility that the EU and China get together and talk more constructively about resolving all the disagreement on tariff, for example?
Well, I think there's certainly an interest in Germany and Europe to have good trade relations with China, that's for sure. On the other side, I think Germany and Europe also needs to be cautious that we don't become too dependent on China. This is an issue that has already been identified a couple of years ago. There is the speech of de-risking from China. So, of course, we need to be cautious, and there are some certain risks associated with trading with China. Of course, there's the economic risk. We know that sometimes they also do foul play when it comes to their trade. They have subsidies to a lot of companies. And of course, there's also the geostrategic risk. We don't know how they will approach the Taiwan crisis. Will they become even more aggressive as they have been in the past? How they will react within the South China Sea. So these are all possible disruptions that need to be taken into, or possible disruptions that needs to be taken in account. And I think that Europe needs to be cautious and needs to have a very balanced trade policy. And that also includes not only China and the US, but also, of course, other countries, South Korea, Latin America. Currently, we are in trade negotiations with South Korea to update the current free trade agreement. We are in trade negotiations with Latin America to close this trade agreement. So I think it's very important for the European economy to be very resilient and to have to diversify its supply chains and also its export markets.
Yes, of course, there are many actors in play, but let's talk about the US, especially the second Trump administration. Because during the campaign season, President-elect Trump mentioned imposing universal tariff of at least 10%. How do you view the significance of this policy to the EU economic performance?
I think that's definitely a threat. As just mentioned, Europe is a very open economy, and disruptions and tariffs are always harmful for the European economy. I think the strategy of Europe will be first to get into talks with Trump, right, and try to find somehow a deal, offer him something. So already there are talks of maybe we can offer the US to buy more gas, for example, right? That could be one option. I think if that announced measure of Trump really will come into place, there are calculations among European think tanks that this could cost up to 1% of the European GDP. So it's definitely a threat. So I think we should try to find a solution and also try to accompany also the demands of the US. I think Europe really needs to try to avoid escalation of the trade tensions. On the other side, I also think that Trump is not almighty, right? And of course, he made this announcement now of those 10%, but he will realize that his own companies or the companies in the US and the American citizens, they also benefit from a free trade. And there are restrictions. If you look at the economic effects of tariffs, they might lead to higher prices. That means higher inflation. If you look at the other proposed policies of Donald Trump, cutting down migration, even deporting illegal migrants, this has a very increasing effect on wages, also drives up inflation. So he has also some restrictions. I'm sure he wants the best for the American companies and for America. So I think that also means good trade relations with Europe, and I'm pretty sure he knows that.
Yes, like you said, the US should consider some potential troubles as well. But because of these concerns, it was reported that EU has already prepared some measures like appointing transatlantic coordinator to discuss potential troubles and establishing a Trump task force, for example. So I'm wondering what kind of other measures that the EU has prepared so far.
Well, I think there are already some discussions what could be offered to Donald Trump, for example, buying more gas. That's something, by the way, that also worked under the last Trump administration. Actually, what happened that the surplus that is so much criticized by Donald Trump, the trade surplus of the EU towards US has increased. So his measures actually didn't work that much, also because Europe offered him something that he finally took. I think if we look at a more general approach, I think Europe really needs to be careful of one strategy of Trump, and that is he links security policy with economic interest, and that creates leverage against Europe. We've seen that already now. His incoming Vice President Vance, he tweeted that if the EU is regulating X, or formerly Twitter, the social media platform, if this is going to be strongly regulated by the EU, US will pull out of NATO. I mean, actually nothing has to do with each other, but they use this, their leverage that they have on security on the EU as something to pursue their own economic interest. And I think this is something dangerous, and to be prepared from this, I think Europe needs to be more independent when it comes to defense and when it comes to its own military. So if we want to be Trump-proof, I think we really will need to invest more in our own security. By the way, that's also something that Donald Trump is actually demanding, so maybe we will find a solution here.
Yes, there are also some experts speculating that these tariff threats can be part of U.S. strategy, because it is President Trump, right? So it can be aiming at encouraging the EU to be on the U.S. side in countering China in the future. So how do you see the merit in this strategy, if that is realized?
I mean, I'm not able to look inside Donald Trump's head. I don't know his strategy. I'm not even sure if he has a strategy, right? I think I would agree on the point that America and the EU needs to cooperate. I also think that China might be the bigger threat when it comes to the economy, but of course also when it comes to security. So of course Europe and America need good relations, and we need to cooperate and find a common strategy how to deal with China. That not only includes the US and Europe, that also includes other players, actors like Japan, South Korea. I think we need to find a way how we will address the more and more aggressive behavior of China. However, I think that even though Europe, America and South Korea have overlapping interests, the interests are not completely similar. So I think that Europe needs to be strong and also have a lot of self-esteem to pursue its own interest, together with their partners, together with America, together with South Korea, to find a common line that is in the interest of all countries, America, EU, Japan, South Korea.
Yes, of course, there are many areas of cooperation between the EU and South Korea as well. It'll be very fascinating to see how we use lessons learned from the past and craft a very resilient policy in the future. Thank you for your insight, and let's wrap up for today.
Thanks again for having me.
Thank you. Before we wrap up the GeoVista, it's time to take a look at moments from around the globe through images. Join me, Jina Kim, as we explore them together. As momentum builds toward finalizing a free trade agreement between the European Union and South America's Mercosur bloc to be finalized by the end of the year, protests against the deal continue. A key point of contention is the environmental impact of increased agricultural imports from Mercosur nations. France in particular has consistently opposed the agreement, raising concerns about deforestation and its consequences. On November 19th, Russia unveiled the official logo commemorating the 80th anniversary of its victory over Nazi Germany in World War II. Meanwhile, as the conflict between Russia and Ukraine reaches its 1,000th day, protests and events condemning the war have been held in various locations worldwide. U.S. automaker Ford has announced plans to cut 4,000 jobs across Europe by the end of 2027. The company revealed that it intends to eliminate 2,900 jobs in Germany, 800 in the UK, and 300 in other European countries. while currently negotiating with labor unions. This decision comes as Germany's automotive market shrinks by 26% following the withdrawal of governmental incentives for electric vehicle purchases. Amid Germany's deepening political crisis, escalating trade tensions with China, and the ripple effects of U.S. President-elect Trump's U.S. election victory, uncertainty in the automotive industry appears to be growing. This is President-elect Donald Trump alongside SpaceX CEO Elon Musk observing the 6th orbital test flight of the company's massive spacecraft Starship. President-elect Trump's attendance signals a strengthening alliance with Musk, who stands to benefit from Trump's election victory, as Musk is expected to wield significant influence in the next administration. Reports of internal resistance and conflict have also emerged. Many are now questioning how long this strategic partnership between the two will endure. That wraps up today's coverage. Join me again next week as we explore new angles on the world's most pressing issues. I'm Jina Kim, and this has been the GEOVISTA. Thank you for joining us.